Welcome to another edition of the Inspired Stories podcast, where leaders share their experiences so we can learn from their successes and be inspired by how they've overcome adversity. My name is Anthony Codispoti, and today's guest is Kelly Alston, Market President at Mills Automotive Group. Founded in 2004 and headquartered in Pineville, Louisiana, Mills Automotive Group is known for its wide selection of new and used vehicles, along with professional service and maintenance support. They carry multiple brands and have dealerships in 7 states. You can browse their inventory online at millsautogroup.com. Their mission is to treat every customer's need with the utmost care and continue providing help beyond the date of purchase. Kelly has led teams in his role since February 2024 and brings vast experience in automotive sales and warranty processes. Prior to becoming market president, he served as a variable operations director and general manager at other dealerships. Along the way, the group has been recognized for its unwavering dedication to customer service. Mills Automotive Group has expanded its footprint while also collaborating with major manufacturers, recently partnering with Fisker to introduce electric vehicles. Now, before we get into all that good stuff, today's episode is brought to you by my company, Add Back Benefits Agency, where we offer very specific and unique employee benefits that are both great for your team and fiscally optimized for your bottom line. One recent client was able to add over $900 per employee per year in extra cash flow by implementing one of our innovative programs. Results vary for each company. Some organizations may not be eligible. To find out if your company qualifies, you can contact us today at addbackbenefitsagency.com. All right, back to our guest today, Market President at Mills Auto Group, Kelly Alston. I appreciate you making the time to share your story today.
Thanks for having me.
All right, Kelly, so every inspiring story has a beginning. I'm curious to hear what sparked your journey in the car industry and what moments along the way made you realize that this was your calling.
So it's a funny story. I got into this business by accident. I was in college, getting my degree in finance, and my ultimate goal was to graduate, get into banking, end up back in New York on Wall Street as an investment banker. And I went to a job fair, and I was just looking for something as a resume enhancement to kind of put me head and shoulders above everyone else that was just graduate with a college degree with no experience, and ran across this this one display. It was a car dealership, and I always liked cars. My dad was really into cars. He was in the car business as well. So I just had a conversation, and so I ended up having a conversation with the guy. He invited me to his office, and I was intrigued by it, and I decided that, I wanted to apply for the job, and went and interviewed with the general manager, and he originally told me that he wouldn't hire me because I could only work part-time. So I made a deal with him, and I told him if I could sell just as many or more than his average salesperson, then he could keep me. And if I didn't, then you know what, I would walk away, no questions asked. And he took me up on that offer. So first month, outsold most of the salespeople, continued to do well. And I actually, I went in to resign because I had gotten a job with a bank when I graduated. And the vice president of the company, and this was a pretty good size automotive group. They had 20 stores. And the vice president of the company came down and had a conversation with me, basically telling me that, he felt like I had what it took to go very far in this business. And he asked me to give it 1 year to see where it took me. And I agreed. And the rest is history.
So a couple of things I want to unpack there. First of all, I think it's really interesting that you went to him with sort of a counter offer. Hey, let me work part-time. If I can hit some numbers, you keep me. I'm going to guess car guys, they're sales guys, right? He
Hmm.
probably kind of liked that confidence that you were sort of bringing to the table. He's like, all right, going to give this young kid
Absolutely.
a shot.
Yep, absolutely. That was my first sale. I had to sell me. Yeah.
Now, what was it that you think made you so successful right out of the gate with sales? Had you had some training? Did you have a background in sales?
No, I think I'm a problem solver by nature. Um, and I think the fact that I'm a good listener. So I would just ask good questions, and people would basically tell me what it was going to take for them to buy a car, and I listened, and then I applied those things throughout the process to convince them to do it. And I also think because I was a college student, I was very unassuming. Um, and they didn't look at me like they did maybe a typical salesperson, um, just trying to get a commission. I told everybody I was a college student, and you know what, I'm doing this for experience. And I think that brought down the guard
Mm,
and allowed me to gain trust quickly, and which allowed me ultimately to sell vehicles.
I like that. Hey, I'm a college kid. I'm doing this for the experience. Right, that brings down their guard because they know, right, the car guy, he's got a commission to make. He's going to
Yeah.
try to push something that is going to be good for him. So you've sort of erased that right out of the gate. Now, talk to me more about the part where you're a problem solver, you're a good listener. Like for people listening now who are like, hey, I want to be better at sales. I want to learn from Kelly and the techniques that he's used. What can you kind of teach us there?
I guess, and for some reason, it's come naturally to me. Even when I was in school, um, I was, especially in math, I was able to see the numbers different. They just look different to me, and I could always come up with a better method of getting the answer than what the teacher taught. I don't know if it's just something intuitive about just figuring out a better and more efficient way to do it. But I think that the problem solving part and the listening part is I usually work backwards. I work from the result backwards, and it allows me to come up with creative ways to get to that result. Even in conversations, I even share with my team. You know, I go into a conversation with what do I want it to result in, and then I work backwards based on the person, the situation, my relationship, and that garners the way I deliver the message. Because at the end of the day, I want to achieve a certain result, so I work backwards from that, and I think that's I apply the same principle when I'm solving any type of problem.
Let's talk about it more specifically in a sales perspective. Can you maybe kind of role play for us an example of you've got a client that comes in, a potential customer looking to buy a car. You know that you want to help them kind of find the vehicle that's best for them. How do you work backwards and sort of structure your conversation around that?
Well, for me in sales, history is usually the best teacher. So usually I start off by asking questions about their last purchase, right? What is it about your current car that you like the most? What is it uh, about your current car that you like the least? What is the one thing that you wish you had in your current car? What's changed in your life since your last purchase, right? So typically people are creatures of habit. So the same way they bought their last car is typically the same way they're going to buy this one. Plus or minus, something changing in their life where, let's say, for instance, they need something bigger because now they have a family, or they want something a little bit nicer because they got a job promotion and different things like that. So just asking the right questions, but starting from a point of what did they do the last time they were in this situation and they were looking to purchase a vehicle? Because typically it's going to be you know 90% of the same things this time
Mm.
around.
So They asked you to stay. You got that bank job that you were hoping for, right?
Hmm.
The job at that dealership helped with your resume, helped to get you your foot
Hmm.
in the door at that bank. They're like, hold on, Kelly. We see something in you. We want you to stay. What was it about that environment that made you want to stick with it a little bit longer?
So it's two things. One, and it was funny. So my general manager was also at this in this conversation. They actually took me to lunch, and I remember I was still on the edge, and the VP asked the general manager to show me his paycheck. And when I saw the kind of money that he made, I'm like, okay. And actually, I made kind of a smart remark to him. I was joking, but I wasn't joking. I told him, I said, look, I know I'm smarter than you, so I know what I can do. So I'm in. But also, it was a merit based environment, um, and I saw that you really could control your own destiny. If you were a performer, it was just about politics. It wasn't about who liked you and who didn't. It was if you could perform and you could deliver results, you would get bigger opportunities. So um, I've always been a person that would bet on myself. So that really intrigued me about the business.
Kelly, you've obviously achieved a level of success that a lot of other folks would aspire to. What do you feel like were the key decisions or actions along the way that helped you secure the role that you've got now?
Being patient, being patient. Um, One of the things that is a stigma in this business is turnover. And some of it is, people being asked to leave, but a lot of it is people searching for opportunities and, trying to, move up through the ranks. So maybe, going over here because maybe the grass looks greener over here. I've only worked two places in 26 years.
Wow.
So, and I've had plenty of opportunities to leave both of the places numerous times. Um, and I think being patient, believing in the process, trusting the process, um, and trusting the people that I work with and I work for.
Mills has become a pretty sizable collection of dealerships. What is it about this company that you feel has allowed it to be so successful?
I'll tell you the owner of the company, and I've known him for a very long time, even prior to him starting his dealership group. We actually worked at the same company starting out. I came to work for him when he bought his second dealership, and he's just a genuine guy um, that is very trustworthy, and he gives back. He's a very generous person, um, and I think when you have those principles, and he's a Christian guy, and um, I am as well, and I just believe when you give, you get in return. And one thing that is not short, this company's never been short on, is giving its resources, and giving people opportunities to improve themselves. And I think when you do that and you do things in the right mindset with the right intentions, I just think it comes back to you. And that's why we've been able to grow so much.
How does your faith influence your leadership style, Kelly?
Oh, it's huge. Servant leadership. I serve my people. They do not serve me. I serve them. And that's a principle straight out of the Bible, right? So that's how we operate. We turn the pyramid upside down. Um, I believe that the person at the top is most of the time the least important person because they're the furthest away from where really the action happens, right? I used to tell when I was running a dealership, I used to reiterate to my team that I was the most out of control person in the whole store. I relied on everybody else doing their job for my success. So I had the least amount of control of anybody in the store. And that's how I operated. So I made sure that everybody that was responsible for generating the results had everything that they needed, and I supported them in that way.
Can you maybe think of a specific example of a time where you kind of, went out of your way to make sure that an employee had what they needed that, I don't know, maybe that kind of thing wouldn't have happened in a different type of work environment where somebody wasn't driven by servant leadership?
Perfect example. I got a great example. So I had a young man that I hired. He was from Cuba, um, and this guy just had an amazing personality and so much energy. And I remember when I interviewed him, I really did not understand 50% what he said, but it was just a pure enthusiasm, just something about him. I'm like, I've got to give this guy a shot. I've got to give him an opportunity. And sure enough, he comes in and customers love him. They can't understand half of what he's saying, but they just understand. They just love his enthusiasm. And after he was with me about 3 years, I went and hired a English as a second language tutor for him out of my own pocket, and I had them come in twice a week for an hour to work with him on his English because I saw that he could be more than a salesperson, but he had to improve this. And as hard as he worked for me, I wanted to give back for him to him. I didn't even try and run it through the company. Didn't want to go. I said, you know what, this is something that I'm going to do for him. So that's a perfect example.
That's such a cool story. So you've been with Mills since 2016, about
Mm-hmm.
8 or 9 years.
Mm-hmm.
Just in the past year, you've moved
Actually,
up.
I've been with 2006.
2006. Oh,
2006.
thanks for the
18 years.
correction. So 18 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Just in the past year, you've moved up to market president.
Mm-hmm.
What is that role? What does a market president do?
So we have 34 stores in our group, and um, we went through a transition about a year ago where we decided to split the group in half so that we could have better coverage and oversight. So in my previous role as variable operations director, I was pretty much just in charge of the sales side of the operation for all of our stores. So moving to the market president role, now I'm in charge of every aspect of it. So not just the sales, but service, accounting, every single aspect of the business. But I'm doing it for 18 of our stores in our southern region. So I cover everything in North Carolina, South Carolina, and Louisiana.
And so then you've got a counterpart who's doing the same kind of role for the
In the
other
northern.
16 stores.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. And that transition just happened about a year ago.
About a year ago. Mm-hmm.
What was kind of the inspiration for making that change? And how do you feel like it's been going over the last 12 months?
Well, the inspiration was to get the stores more support because we were spread way too thin, trying to cover all of the stores. Um, and I think I think it's gone well. The stores have definitely benefited from the additional support and the focus. I've been able to travel less, so that's been a personal personal benefit for me as well. So it's worked out well.
So you mentioned that the owner that you work for, that you work with, you guys knew each other from a previous job,
Mm-hmm.
and you came to work with him when he just had, was it two dealerships?
Yep, two dealerships.
So from 2 dealerships to 34, that's significant growth. I mean, the cost of opening up a dealership is not small. I'm kind of curious to hear about growth strategy. Like, what did you guys do to sort of pour gasoline on the fire and really light this thing up?
Well, it's funny when you talk about growth strategy. There's never been like a number of dealerships that he's wanted to purchase or we wanted as a group. We just looked at it on a case by case basis. So if it was the right, the right store in the right market, the right brand, uh, then we just said yes to it. So no real like we want to go out and have all these stores. It's just when and it goes back to that faith piece, right? Opportunities will find you. You don't have to chase them. And we've never chased anything. Literally, just about every last one of these opportunities have found us. Whether it's a manufacturer bringing it to us or a owner wanting to sell their business and wanted to sell it to a certain type of person um, to make sure their employees are continue to be taken care of. So um, that's uh, that's how they've come. We haven't chased them; they've chased us.
So I want to dig into that a little bit because there's some people who are listening that may hear that advice and be like, oh, all I have to do is sit here on my couch and watch Netflix and the opportunities are going to find me. And I don't think that's what your message is.
Mm-mm.
No.
No, when you're a performer, when you perform, um, when your reputation and your work speaks for itself, then people want to partner with you. They want um, to be a part of what you're doing. So, like a lot of the dealerships that we've gotten have been from the manufacturers coming in and saying, "Hey, here's this opportunity. Are you interested?" So, and that only comes from doing a good job and performing.
That makes a lot more sense.
Hmm.
So these opportunities found you because you guys were executing every day at a really high level.
Correct. Yep.
I'm kind of curious as you think about sort of a consistent strategy that you guys might use at each dealership level that allows you to be so successful in hitting numbers in each location. Does that come down to you guys have got a really good marketing strategy? You're running the best kinds of ads. You've got the most effective salespeople. You're representing the best brands. Like what's kind of the most important piece of all of that?
Recruiting good people. People are everything in this business because it's I call it the people, but it's not the car business. It's the people business. Um, and you can have the best brand in the greatest location with the best marketing strategy, but if when those customers show up, they don't find a group of people that they trust and want to do business with, you're not going to sell anything. So it's all people, and we put a heavy focus on um, recruiting the right people. We hire more for mindset than skill set. We can teach you a skill set. We can't teach a mindset. Um, so that's what we really focus on.
And what is that mindset that you're looking for?
Uh, a determined and driven, and we have what we call our 5 pillars, which are our core values of the group, and is character, integrity, teamwork, work ethic, and performance. Those are our 5 pillars, and that's what we look for in every single team member that we bring on. And we also look for the intangibles, the things that you can't teach. I can't teach someone drive. I can't teach someone desire, right? If you come with that and you come with those other 5 things, I can teach you the skill set, but I can't teach you the right mindset.
So for people listening who think, oh, yeah, Kelly, that makes a lot of sense. I want to do that in my business. But I don't know how to identify somebody who has that kind of mindset from an interview environment. Like after they've been there for a few months, you've seen how they operate, you see how they perform, you see how they fit in with everybody, you got a better sense. But how do you guys kind of flesh that out in the early stages before bringing them on board?
Well, one of the things, like, I have a very regimented interviewing process that I seem to be able to get all the information that kind of brings up those things. So one, when I start an interview, first question I ask is, tell me your story. I want to know your story, right? Not your resume. I want to know your story. And it's funny, most people ask, well, how much do you want to know? I tell them, I want to know everything. And, one of the things that I look for is, have you faced adversity? Have you overcome adversity? Right. And what's been the steps? What's been your decision making? How did you end up where you are today? And usually a person's journey, and when they tell you what they've been through, and also seeing how open they are with you, tells me a lot about a person. Um, and then, I build on the questions, and I've got a series of questions that I ask, that really allows me to get to know a person as a person, not just question them about their experience and resume. Typically, I mean, probably 15 minutes of the interview may be about the technical part of things or their background. The other hour and 15 minutes that I may spend with them is about them as a person.
Mm-hmm. That ratio really says a lot about what it is that you're looking for. I mean, it backs up exactly what you've already told us. You're looking for mindset, not skill set. You can train the skills. You want the person that fits the
Yep.
mold. So, and one of the things you said is, you're looking for somebody that, have you faced adversity? Have you overcome that adversity? What did that look like? I'm kind of curious to hear from your path, looking back at some of your earlier roles, general sales manager, general manager. Is there maybe one specific experience that you can think about and a corresponding lesson from it that you still remember to this day that influences how you run the business today?
Well, I'll tell you, and I moved up very fast at a very young age. And I probably had a lot of roles that maybe I wasn't, my maturity level wasn't ready for the position, but my skill set was. Um, and it was a particular instance when, I remember they hired a gentleman to come in at a position above me, and I felt like I should have had the job. Um, and I did not handle it the right way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I made it my personal mission to show how less competent that guy was than I was. And I was successful in doing that. And they ended up moving the guy out of the position, but they moved somebody else in the position and didn't give it to me. And I remember a conversation, um, same VP, and this is 3, 4 years later. And he sat down with me and he shared with me, he said, um, he was the wrong guy. And you made sure we knew that. But you also showed that you're not ready for that leadership position either.
Mm-hmm.
And he pointed out exactly how I should have handled that. And that, he knew that from a skill set standpoint, I was 100% ready for that job. I could do the job hands down. But he knew I was not ready from a maturity standpoint. And I remember he told me, he's like, you know what? You got to serve in order to be served. And, I had to take a step back and I took a different approach. And you know what? I made the new guy. I made him look good. I made him as successful as he could be. Um, and I ended up getting the job the next time around. So, but that was a very valuable lesson.
So if you had that situation to do all over again, and maybe using the advice that you were given on how you should have handled it from that VP, what would you have done differently? What would have
I would,
been
I
the
would,
right way?
I would have supported him. I would have trained him. I would have helped him instead of expose him. I exposed all his weaknesses, and I should have never done that.
Mills has positioned itself as a consumer focused dealer with in house financing and maintenance. Can you maybe share an example of how you've integrated those services to create a seamless customer experience?
Well, most dealerships operate this way, but we focus on retention. We want the customers to come back. We don't want them to just buy one car. We want them to buy several cars from us. So, we focus on the areas where customers typically uh, leave, right? So, um, sells the first car, service sells everyone after that. So, regardless to how good of a sales experience someone has had, if the service experience throughout their ownership cycle um, is not equally as good, typically they won't come back to the dealership and buy a car. So we really focus in on that aspect of it.
Let's talk about the warranty process. You've got a background in focusing on this. Um, for lay people like myself, what's an underappreciated aspect of warranties that can significantly influence a dealership's success, and how are you using that to kind of benefit Mills?
Well, typically the thing that customers hate is paying for a car and paying to get it fixed as well. So, we look at selling service contracts not as just a profit center, but also a way of keeping the consumer happy and putting them in a position where they are not, burdened with huge unexpected cost at the absolute wrong time. Right? Nothing happens at the right time. It always happens at the wrong time. So, we really focus on providing that service to the consumer and really explaining it to them in the right way so that they make a good decision and decide to purchase, a service contract so that they have more economical control over their, you know, car ownership experience.
How do you present that to a customer in a way that right doesn't feel like you're trying to upsell them? Hey, you want fries with that? You want to biggie size it? Like, how does
Well,
that delivery kind of come
you,
across?
we just we lay it out and just we tell the consumer everything that's available for them from a product standpoint, whether it's insurance, whether it's coverage for their tire and wheel, and we explain what it is, what are the benefits of having it, how much it costs, and we let them make the decision.
So it's not a pressure situation. It's almost like you're a
Yep.
teacher. You're
Yep.
you're educating them. You're just sharing information.
Very, very low pressure.
No.
You know what? We give you the opportunity to purchase it, not really trying to sell you anything.
I want to talk about electrical vehicles. You guys recently partnered with Fisker. Tell me about that partnership and how it unfolded and how it's going so far.
Well, Fisker's had some issues. So Fisker is no longer, they're no longer a manufacturer. They've filed bankruptcy and they've gone on. But we've actually partnered with a different EV company called VinFast.
Okay.
And VinFast is a Vietnamese company. They've just come to the United States. They're actually going to be building a factory in North Carolina in the next few years, and that's gone real well. They have a very nice car, great price point for consumers, and it's a great option for someone wanting to enter into the EV space.
This isn't a brand that I'm familiar with. Can you tell me more about it?
Yeah, it's I mean it's just been in the United States about a year.
Okay.
Like I said, they're based out of Vietnam, uh, complete startup. Um, but from what I understand, they are well funded, well heeled, and they've got a good product and a great design. And we've been selling them now for about 4 months, and it's a great car. I mean, they had a great lease for consumers, $349 a month, and I mean it's a very nice car, SUV, leather interior, very very nice car.
Hey, I'm looking at the website here now. Yeah, they're slick looking.
Hmm.
What are maybe the advantages of, and this for folks who haven't heard of it before, you can find their website, VIN, fastauto.us. What are some of the advantages of this particular line of electrical vehicles over maybe some of the other options out there?
Um, One is the price point. Um, the best way to purchase an EV is to lease it, because you get the government subsidies with the lease and everything like that. Um, and they found a niche at that price point, but you don't sacrifice anything. I mean, these cars have leather interior, all the features that you would find in a luxury vehicle, and it's at a great price point.
And why specifically is a lease a better way to go with these cars?
Well, a couple of things. One is the cost. EVs are naturally more expensive
Mm-hmm.
because it's a lot more R&D in it. It's a huge
Batteries are
investment.
expensive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
huge investment by the manufacturers. So the price point is pretty high. Um, so leasing is the most affordable way to do it, as well as there's a lot of volatility from a resale value with EVs. I mean, it's almost like watching a stock market. They go up, they go down, and leasing it will insulate you from the risk of what it may or may not be worth 3 years from now. Because there's just still a lot of unknowns, especially with the new administration. You know, quite possibly taking the focus away from EVs. We just don't know what that's going to do to the market. So I advise most people to lease them, because at that point, at the end of your lease, if it's not worth anywhere close to what they say is worth, you can, drop it off and walk away. So all the risk is deferred, to the lender. You're not assuming any of that risk.
Makes a lot of sense. We're recording this interview on January 22nd, 2025. Right, as Kelly mentioned, new administration has come in. Not sure what that's going to do to sort of the landscape of EVs.
Mhm.
So certainly some questions to be answered there over time. Um, Kelly, you guys have got operations across 7 states, hundreds of employees. I'm curious, how do you systematize and ensure consistent training, culture, service across all these different locations?
It's very difficult. It's a challenge. You know, One is using technology to bring all of these people in all of these different places together, so that everyone's getting the same message at the same time. So, we use a lot of technology. I have Zoom meetings once, twice a week with my teams, um, so that, I can deliver a consistent message across the entire group, and really charge them with letting it trickle down and then holding them accountable to it, at every level.
I'm also curious, I would assume, and tell me if I'm wrong on this, Kelly, with so many different locations across 7 different states, I would think that sometimes the market demand, um, I don't know, just sort of the flavor of the local community kind of dictates that the store be run a little bit differently. I see you nodding your head.
Yeah,
What are some of those differences and how do you accommodate for them?
there's certain nuances in certain markets for sure, and you know you got to keep your core principles what they are, but allow for the little small niches in these certain communities. Give you a perfect example. Um, we've got dealerships in New Orleans. You know, we got to give those stores Mardi Gras off. They got to be off for Mardi Gras. Um, other markets, everybody's working. That market, everybody's off for Mardi Gras. So when you have certain things like that, and then you know, it, everywhere does have a different flavor a little bit, and you gotta allow some creativity in those markets, but keep the core of what you have in place from your principles, and don't deviate from any of that stuff.
You mentioned relying on tech as a way to help communicate sort of the mission, the values
Mhm.
across such a wide geography. You guys have been around for a while. There's a lot of tradition within Mills. So I'm kind of curious to hear maybe a particular example of a time where we were able to introduce an innovation, maybe it's tech related, or a new service that just kind of shows that balance of tradition with new.
Yeah, I will tell you this. Even though we're a young company, um, we have remained pretty steadfast in the basics of things. Now, yeah, we've introduced new technology and different things like that, um, but we haven't really deviated much from our core business and how we've done business. Um, you know, we do introduce new technology and things, and when we do that, we bring the team together to our headquarters in North Carolina, and roll it out, and then we go into the stores to make sure it's being implemented. A lot of times that's when I'm traveling, when we're implementing new things, because you got to have boots on the ground. You have to see it in the environment, and it's a lot of work, but we get it done.
Let's talk about COVID for a minute. COVID put the auto industry on quite a roller coaster.
Yep.
What was it like for you guys, and how did you navigate that?
It was a very interesting time. Um, I think we did a very good job. One of the things that we did, probably that I'm most proud of, is when everyone took the opportunity to lay people off, and cut their workforce because of all the different programs that were available and everything else that was going on. We did not lay off one person.
Not one person across the
Not one.
entire organization.
Not one. We did not lay off one person. The only thing we did, and I remember the conversation was, you know, we weren't going to lay anyone off, but if someone did not fit our culture, it was time to part ways with them and replace them. Um, because we just had a belief, that, you know what, we were going to be okay, and we would figure it out and the business would be fine. Um, and we did not lay off one person during COVID.
Now, as you know, we can kind of look in the rearview mirror, right? There was a big drop off, right? And then things came back like a rocket ship. And so, it probably from a business perspective looks like a pretty smart move to have not let people off. But you didn't know that in those early days, weeks, months.
Mhm.
You didn't know if and when it was going to come back. There was so much uncertainty at the time. So I don't know. I'm going to go out on a limb here and tell me if I'm right or wrong. I get the sense that that decision not to lay anybody off was less about what made good business sense and was more about how do we take care of our people and how do we make sure that they can keep a roof over their head, that they can put food on their table, that they can take care of their families.
Absolutely. And it was actually the second time that we made this decision. So the first time back in 2008, we only had two dealerships. Uh, One was the store I was running, which was a Chrysler store. And if you remember back in 2008, Chrysler filed bankruptcy,
Yeah.
right? And I remember the night that they filed bankruptcy, uh, myself and the owner, we were sitting in my office and literally we just stared at each other probably for 10 minutes. Neither one of us knew what to say. And I remember, you know, we prayed and he's like, let's meet back 8 o'clock in the morning and we'll figure it out. And came back in 8 o'clock that morning and, he shared with me, he said, look, we're not gonna lay a single person off.
Wow.
You know what, we're gonna cut everything before we cut people and we're gonna figure it out. And throughout that whole bankruptcy process with Chrysler, we didn't lose not one person. So we had been there before in a situation where things didn't look like it was going to be okay. And so we had something to reference. And we came out of that, I mean, so strong because our people, um, they recognized the sacrifice of keeping everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And so they worked twice as hard. So we believed that that was going to happen again, and it did.
And remind us how did the Chrysler bankruptcy play out?
Well, Chrysler sold to Fiat, Italian company, and they invested in it, and government put a bunch of money behind it, and uh, you know business came back very strong, and Chrysler ended up working itself out and becoming a great brand again with mainly Jeep and Ram, and we were very successful as a Chrysler dealer.
So as I hear these two examples, the Chrysler bankruptcy and the COVID experience, if we're to draw sort of the thread between them, the common lesson to be learned, I mean, for your business, it sort of backs up what you were saying before. You're not in the car business, you're in the people business.
People business.
You guys always approached it from how do we take care of our people first, and the rest of it's going to kind of figure itself out.
Yep. And I remember a mentor of mine shared with me, he told me, he said, Kelly, if you always focus and you're concerned about what your people make, you'll never have to worry about what you make. And that's been a core principle of mine. You know what? As long as if my people are successful, I have no choice but to be successful. So I focus my energy around them and not me. My success is going to be a byproduct of theirs anyway.
I like that message. Kelly, growth often comes from our biggest challenges. I would like to hear from you a serious challenge that you had to overcome. Maybe it's business, maybe it's personal, combination of the two. What was that? What were some practical steps that helped you overcome the challenge? And ultimately, what did you learn from that experience?
Probably the biggest challenge that I've had to overcome was, so I lost my dad at that time, the height of my career. And my dad was my best friend. I talked to him 2-3 times a day. He gave amazing advice. He could always point me in the right direction. He just had a knack for it. And my career is taking off. I'm being recognized, and stores setting records. Everything's going well, and then one day, the compass, my compass, the thing that keeps me straight is gone. And I remember I felt like uh, if I had to give an analogy, like a kid that lost his parents in the grocery store, and you don't know what's going to happen. You can't find your, you know what I mean? So it was a different time for me. And, you know, I had to really rely on one, my faith, but two, all the lessons leading up to that point. And I remember sitting in my office one day. This was like a few weeks after, and almost hearing his voice in my ear saying, "Look, I prepared you for this. You're ready to run this race by yourself." And that was a very, very, very challenging time running a business. Got a young family, and the one person I could always count on was no longer there. So, but it taught me a lot about myself. It taught me how resilient I was. Um, it also taught me that as a parent, you are constantly preparing your children for you not being around, and you need to focus on that. You need to equip them with everything they need to be uh, functional and thrive without you.
How old were you when your father passed?
35.
35. So
35.
obviously not a little kid, but I like that you used that analogy because that's what it felt like, right?
Oh
He was such a key part of your life. He was your
yeah.
compass. He was the person you could go to for advice, for help,
Hmm.
and suddenly he's gone.
Yep.
And that piece, that directional component of you has disappeared.
Yep.
Very disorienting, very emotional. Um, yeah. And tell me how you were able to lean on your faith to help you through this difficult time.
Well, you know what? I just I always believe everything happens for a reason, and you know I believe God doesn't make any mistakes, and I began to kind of replay like the last couple of years, and all the things that I was able to do for and with my dad during that time, because he had about a 2-year illness. And even flying home, and staying in the hospital with him, and some of the most memorable conversations I had with my dad probably occurred 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, sitting in the hospital room. And you know although those, at the time I looked at it as an inconvenience, with him being in the hospital and everything like that, I wouldn't trade those days for anything. They were uh, extremely valuable. I hold on to them today, and so things things work out when you look at something that isn't ideal, right? But then you can look back and see that it was all orchestrated, because when how else would I be fully engaged, and we would have that time with no distractions other than in that hospital room
Mhm.
at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, to have some of the conversations that we had that really prepared me for life without him.
I like what you said, Kelly, about, as a parent, your biggest job is to help prepare the kids for the time when you're not there. If, and how old are your kids now?
23 and 21.
So if if I asked you to give the single most important piece of advice or lesson learned to impart upon your kids for that eventuality, because we can go through a huge long list of things, right? The number one most important thing, what would that be?
Let them make decisions so you can understand how they think, how they make decisions, and then begin to guide them in their decision making process. That was one of the things my dad did for me. He never told me what to do. He would ask me questions. He would give me pros and cons, and then he would let me make a decision. And if it was a wrong decision, then we would recap it later. If it was the right decision, you know what? He would tell me, you know what? You did it the right way. And that's one thing I've tried to do with my kids is to let them make decisions, guide them, kind of be the the box around them, but let them play around in that box and see how they make decisions, and try and give them guidance on the right way to assess things and make decisions.
You can ask them questions that kind of, point their thinking in the right directions to at least be considering the right options. Yeah.
hmm
Kelly, if you were to recommend one resource, a book, a course, a podcast that would help someone grow either their business or as a person, what would that be?
The Craig Groeschel Leadership Podcast is phenomenal.
What would somebody get from that?
Oh, you get so much. So Craig Groeschel, he's the pastor of, I think, the largest church in the country, Life Church, and he does a leadership podcast, and it covers every topic. He does it, I think it's twice a month. He puts it out every other Thursday or something like that. But he covers every leadership topic there is, and there's a lot of biblical principles in them as well. So I've actually used it with my team. Once a month, I like to do a leadership uh, thing on our call, and I've used. It's been 2 years now. 2 years ago, I decided that I was going to use his podcast as the mechanism for my leadership training, and my leaders love it.
And
You
so,
know,
what you'll hear an episode and you're like, oh, this is spot on. I'm going to ask my leadership team to listen to this, and then we can all sort of discuss it, kind of like a book club together. Is that sort of how
absolutely.
you use it?
hmm
No.
Yep.
We will find the link for that podcast that Kelly mentioned and put it in the show notes for folks in case they can't find it on their own. Kelly, curious to hear maybe a fun or interesting fact about you that most people wouldn't know.
Oh, let's see. Fun or interesting fact that most people don't know. Um, I'd say this is interesting. So I'm in sales and I'm in front of people all the time, but I am an introvert.
Mm-mm.
I'm an introvert. I would I would much rather be by myself than be around a bunch of people. But my life is people, so that's a pretty interesting thing about me, that my preference is I am an introvert.
That's fascinating, right? Because you think of the most successful salespeople, you always think of a big personality, somebody who's gregarious, who just naturally has the gift of gab and enjoys just sort of chatting with people. When you first got started in sales, did you recognize that you were an introvert and this was
Oh yeah,
something that you had to overcome, or how
for
did
sure.
you think through that?
For sure. Well, for me, the most awkward thing was going out and meeting a customer, because it was a stranger. I didn't like it. I mean, it was awkward for me. But, you know, I'm a competitive person. Um, so I had to figure it out. So for me, process, being very process oriented and process driven, allowed me to overcome uh, that awkwardness and that being an introvert. So I became very regimented in my approach, and I really had my own sales process that I perfected, that allowed me to get through the process, get all the information I needed, establish good rapport. I mean, literally, my first 10 minutes with every customer was the same.
Tell us about it. Because, I mean, there's a lot of people listening who are like, yeah, I'm an introvert too. I'm in a sales role, or I'd like to be in a sales role, and it just feels so uncomfortable to me. What advice can you give from, what you've learned, what you've tried?
Come up with a process, come up with almost a script, right? So my first 10 minutes were scripted. So I went out, introduced myself to the customer, shook their hand. I would not let the customer's hand go until they gave me their name. Then I would use their name. I would ask them specific questions. But one of the things that I was my icebreaker every single time was, so I was from New York. I was in North Carolina at the time. So one of the things that I always start the conversation off with was, you know what, you don't sound like you're from here. Where are you from? And, they would tell me, well, no, I'm from here. And then my follow up would be, well, that's odd. Most people I meet are not from here. Tell me, what kept you here? Or if they weren't from here, my next question is, what brought you here? And it would open up the conversation, and then we could get on common ground, and then it would allow me to ask the other questions that were more related to their vehicle. But it was an easy icebreaker that, one thing I learned, and I was a psychology minor in school too, is everybody likes to talk about themselves. So if I can get people to open up and start talking about themselves, that they'll never stop talking, and I'll find out everything I need to know.
I love that. Kelly, I've got just one more question for you, but before I ask it, I want to do two things. Everybody listening today, I know that you love today's content because Kelly's been an amazing guest with lots of great advice. Please hit the follow button on your favorite podcast app so you can get more of these great stories. I also am going to let you know the best way to continue to follow Kelly's story or to get in touch with him. That's his LinkedIn page. We're going to include that link in the show notes, but if you want to search for it now, his first name is Kelly, Kelly, last name Alston, Alston. Combine that with Mills Auto Group and you'll find him. So last question for you, Kelly, as we look to the future, what exciting changes do you see coming in your industry, and how can others prepare themselves to be part of that?
Well, I think probably some of the most exciting changes, I think we'll see a shift in it's already a shift in how business is being done. It's going to continue to evolve, especially with the new generation of the workforce coming on that is very different than my generation, right? They have things that the things that are important to them are very different than what was important to my generation. Making money was primary. Now it's about time and being included. And I think that's going to create an evolution in the business that's going to make it very different than what it is today.
Kelly, I want to be the first one to thank you for sharing both your time and your story with us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Folks, that's a wrap on another episode of the Inspired Stories podcast. Thanks for learning with us today.